This song. It comes from the heart. Every day I keep hearing people talking about the state of the world daily. Some wondering what is happening. Where do we go from here? No one could foresee. Some say it's the fault of the leaders. They say they just like oppressors. Some say mismanagement from the damn faulty government. But while they're blaming and blaming, I see more people suffering. Where do we go and how shall we move on? So answer these questions. Why must there be retrenchment among the poor ones who working for few cents to take home to their families? Would someone please tell me why one man could have so much money while the next one day he hungry, trying to survive in his country? And I hear that poor man's cry, how come? Tell me, how come? Oh, how come our country's just going down, down, down? How come? Tell me, how come? Oh, how come this whole world just going down, down, down? Every day I walk about, I look east, west, north and south, and what I see in my mind there is still a doubt. I see vagrancy increase, drugs that wouldn't cease, robberies perform just like in the movie. Some say it's the youths of the nation. They say it's total frustration. Some say they're bad, they're a disgrace, and it's so sad. But while they're blaming and blaming, I hear the youth saying something they can't get over. The qualifications are like a joke. So answer more questions. Why drugs take over the city? You know we can't find no cure for me, and we can't find no cure that I could see. Would someone please tell me why food prices keep rising, nurses and teachers keep on resigning? You know abroad, most of them running, and I hear that poor man's cry, how come? Tell me, how come? Oh, how come our country's just going down, down, down? How come? Tell me, how come? Oh, how come our country's just going down, down, down? keep praying night and morning that things got changed just to end this suffering. I hear Satan say has to be a bed, and who not mad say they rather dead. But living here, they find it is too damn dread. Some people turn big refugee. They say they can't live in the country. Gone to Canada, Brooklyn, Washington, D.C. But while they're blaming and blaming, I see more hard times coming. I see more problems facing me and we children. So answer more questions. Why? When you're looking at Parliament, you have to feel it's a movie that you rent. The behavior is so indecent. Would someone please tell me why? Every corner that I meet, I see single mothers on the street begging for something for their children to eat. And I hear that poor man's cry, how come? Tell me, how come? Oh, how come our country's just going down? Chow, chow. How come? Tell me, how come? Oh, how come this whole world just going down? Chow, chow. How come? Stop this suffering. How come? Stop all this grunting. How come? Just tell me how come? How come? Stop the promising. How come? Stop all the lying. How come? Just tell me how come? How come? Let's join in unity to build back our country. How come? Just tell me how come? How come? How come? Oh, how come? Just tell me how come? Good night, Grenada.
Oh yes, Sister Easton Orr out of Tobago. How come? Dealing with poverty there. Big show tonight. Vincent Alexander is here. He's going to tell us all that's happening at GCOM. GCOM, of course, is in the center, has always been at the center. There is unfinished business at GCOM, and there are things that are going on at GCOM now. Lots of questions about what's happening there. And since we have Vincent here, we're going to try to pick his brains on some of the current issues. So stay tuned. Vincent is ready to come on in a couple of minutes. Please share the link, share the live, and let everybody know we're on. I did say last night I had another engagement, and so we weren't on last night. But it seemed as though our show on Tuesday night caused some waves. I noticed the Guyana Chronicle today said that, I insulted young people. Young people who are out there at the launch with Mohammed. Dr. Hines insults young people and all of that stuff. And all of that, and they've been playing some quotes and so on. I think the Chronicle carried an article to that effect, and they had a quote there that I didn't I didn't recognize Dr. Hines insults But you all were here on the show, and but you see how dangerous, how dangerous the politics have gotten, and so we have to be careful about what's happening in this season. We were glad that we spent our time talking about and talking to our young people in particular, because since nomination day, people saw the number of particularly young African Guyanese kids who were out there for Mohammed. We have seen some development since, which suggests that that they were not all loyalists, they were not all there for conviction and so on. But you know, the question of vote buying is real, and the PPP has introduced vote buying into our politics, and now others are following suit. So it's a big issue, and it's not an issue. It's not a problem that we can fix in an election season. Election season is about counting votes, and one has to be cognizant of that. So we are here. But as you all remember, on Tuesday night, we dealt extensively with that issue, and I took a particular stance, which was ignored by the PPP people, who desperate to put some wedge between us and our young people. But some people fell for it. Some people fell for it, you know. I'm trying to update ourselves. Clearly. Some people listened to what they heard from the PPP, and they repeated it without checking our program. So, you know, that's how the politics are. You know, that's how the politics are. But we urge our people. To check before you repeat PPP propaganda. Just thing other than your family, your picnic, your mama, your daddy, etc. After them is your vote. Because the vote determines who governs. And who governs determines who gets what, when, where, and how. The vote is individual, but the vote is also collective, because your individual vote could have consequences for the collective. So your vote is individual, but also collective. Do not waste your vote at this crucial moment. Do not waste it. Do not waste it. All right? So, sisters and brothers, that's my position. I am not condemning those young people, and I encourage you not to do so. Don't condemn them. Hold their hands. If you can talk to them, but don't condemn them. Because they have gotten to that place because of a systemic and institutionalized form of marginalization by the PPP. A 22-year-old was born in 2003. That 22-year-old don't know about the phantom. That 22-year-old don't know about the phantom. That 22-year-old may have a sense of their suffering in ethnic terms. May, but most likely do not. Because none of the political parties has spent the time to do that kind of consciousness work with them. I have tried. The WPA has tried. We have gotten all kind of criticism that we're a one people party and all those nonsense, you know? But those young people have not been helped in preparation for this. You see, 5 years ago, if somebody had said Mohammed would have emerged, we would have tell them they lie. But you don't wait until the thing happens. You work and prepare your people so that when the thing happens, they have the necessary consciousness to push back against it. I would not be so outrageous to say to Black people, you can't support an Indian leader. After Walter Rodney died, Brother UC was for a brief moment the WPA standard bearer. In 1985. He was our presidential candidate. After then, our primary leader was Rupert Rupnarine, Indian. I vote for him. So this foolishness that I am telling people don't vote for an Indian is craziness. Craziness. Rupert Rupnarine was my leader until he got ill. I vote for him. I accept he as my leader. I follow he as my leader. I can't be following an Indian leader and tell people they can't follow an Indian leader. I just want to make it very clear, the simplistic nonsense. But the opposition got to do, the PPP and them got to do their work. I understand that. What I am saying is not about the leader. I'm saying at the end of the day, the election would either be won by the PPP or APNU. The elections would either be won by the PPP or APNU, APNU. And if the supporters, the traditional base, I'm quoting Jack Dio, at his press conference, he said, our traditional base, Indian Guyanese, he said it. And I'm saying our traditional base, Afro-Guyanese. I'm matching Jack Dio. Right? If, and Jack Dio make it very clear, he said, our traditional base not going nowhere. They're not going. If they said 95% of Mohammed crowd there yesterday was Black people. And let me say all the rest were Indians, is 5% Indians. We don't know whether Indians will vote for Mohammed. They have not demonstrated that. All right? It takes about 5,000, 6,000 votes to get a seat. And we don't know if Mohammed get 5,000 or 6,000 Indian, then show the face. And so our young people who are rooting for Mohammed, the question to them is, are they trying to get rid of the PPP? And if you're trying to get rid of the PPP, Mohammed is not your man. Not your man. Pure and simple. If your objective is something else, maybe he's your man. But if your objective is to get rid of the PPP and have a government that is responsible, that is going to look after your interests, Mohammed is not your man. It's unfortunate some more people think that if you show up with Mohammed thing, you're going to get money, and if Mohammed gets into government, he's going to share money left, right, and center. When Mohammed gets into government, it's government money. He can be handling, not your own money. And like all governments, he ain't going to throw it and hear you. He will not throw it and give you. So we have to talk our young people through these things. All right? Don't all on them. Don't please. Don't all on them. Work with them because they're where they are, largely because the PPP systematically for 32 years pushed them there. And partly because our leaders do not recognize that you have to nurse and nurture your base. Which means you can't always avoid race. I'm not saying that you must talk race all the time, because you have other problems other than racial problems. You have gender problems, you have class problems, you have country versus tongue problems. But Orrin Boston was shot not because he was a man, he was shot because he was African. Adriana was murdered not because she's a child, but because she's a black child. And it's easy to kill a black child and get away with it, as the killer of Adriana is running loose. I guarantee you, if that were an Indian child, this government, the PPP government, would have ensured that the killer is behind bars. But if it's an Amerindian child, if it's a black child, the PPP does not feel it's their responsibility. And our leaders have to call a spade a spade. Clinton Bacchus would not, he was not murdered just because he was a little boy. He was an African boy, African young man. I am glad that Indian women, when their sons are on the road, they don't have to worry that somebody will call them or knock on the door and say the police kill your boy. I am glad about that. But when African mothers are home and the little boy drives up on the road, they live with that constant fear that somebody will call, somebody will knock on it and say your son gets shot. That's a reality. Amerindians suffer probably the most economically in this country. They're the poorest. But Amerindian mothers don't have to worry about that part. They don't have to worry that their child will be killed willy-nilly by rogue policemen. That is the reality. And if I can say it, other black leaders, get off your rear and say it and stop it. Don't be worried. Or they call you racist anyway. Anyway. And our leaders have to toughen up. Toughen up. All right? So, we have said, excuse me, we have said a lot tonight. And I think we have covered a lot of bases. Let us go out and win this election. Let us recognize that we cannot panic. We have to believe, as I believe, that we can win this election. I think the numbers, we'll have to come the numbers. And don't forget, the elections are still not, there's no guarantee that the elections are free and fair. So we are fighting for votes, and we are fighting against GCOM, which is prepared not to guarantee free and fair elections. So we need everybody. We all have to make the sacrifice. We all have to make the sacrifice. This thing that we can't fair, we 30-day worker, 20-day worker, 10-day worker, all this nonsense. Some of us, I understand, are fearful, but some of us have to come out and stop being fearful. Fear in this situation is a sin. So onward to September 4th. I am not sure. So there we have it. Yet in spite of that, you're already there for yourself. My plea, not to cuss our children, to work with them, to ensure that we try to give them the kind of consciousness and for them to understand how important the vote is. Don't all on them. Don't condemn them. They are making decisions based on something bigger, based on the systemic marginalization of African people. And yet, in spite of that, the Chronicle said that I insulted African youth. And some of our people this morning saw that. And some begin to cuss me until people said to them, go listen to Dr. Hines, don't listen to PPP propaganda. And some of them were able to do exactly that. Here is the Chronicle headline this morning. David Hines brands African Guyanese as fair game to be bought again. That quotation did not come from me in the program. The PPP make up that quotation. Make up that quotation. Blast Afro-Guyanese youths supporting Azadin Mohammed. Here I am on the program, begging people, don't cuss me, children. Don't think yet. The Chronicle. So you see, I want us to be careful about that in this election season, because the PPP will do a lot of that. And they know that people may not come and listen to an hour program or an half program, and so they take out, they make up things and so on. A lot of our people say, well, Dr. is cussing the people for, and then they got to go back. Some of them call me to apologize, but I want us to be careful about that. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Let's get Vincent in and get the conversation started. Vincent, good evening.
Good evening, David. Good evening to all of those who are viewing.
Before we get to GCOM and what's happening there, I would like you to weigh in on that matter of young African Guyanese turning out for a nomination day in support of Mohammed. Lots of conversation across the political landscape and so on. And you saw there my take on it and how we should approach it. You saw how the Chronicle tried to twist to say I'm cussing and so on. And when the Chronicle is speaking, is the PPP speaking. That kind of stuff. Your thoughts on that development?
David, in the past I have made the point that essentially political parties mobilize people based on commonality of ideas. But they share ideas about what they want to see for their country. So my question that has arisen is, what's the common idea that would have mobilized anybody, and in this instance African Ghanaians, to support a particular party? What's the common idea? What is it they are going after and seeking to use the political movement to go after it? In that context, I have to ask the question which has been asked: what are the policies and the ideas of Muhammad? And I must confess that he himself has said that you will hear about those later. So the extent to which he has said you will hear about those later is the extent to which it cannot be contended that these people have been mobilized by ideas, have been mobilized by policies that they want to do. And so the question is still out there: what has mobilized them? The only thing in the recent past which one can identify Muhammad with is visiting communities and doing quote unquote charitable work. And so if one wants to find a logical reason, public reason for people's association with Muhammad, it can only be said that they are into his charity. They either, on one hand, want to use him to extend charity, or on the other hand, they want to be beneficiaries of his charity. And they probably see the government that he may be in charge of as being a charitable government. And that's the most I could say in terms of what I'm seeing with the Muhammad phenomenon. But I can't say that they're guided by policies and ideas. And I have long before now, even on this program, made the point that political mobilization largely, historically, and classically, is around ideas. And in the absence of that, in the Muhammad instance, you have to ask yourself, what is it that's mobilizing them? And you have to ask yourself what is known about him that could mobilize them. And what is best known about him is charity and philanthropy. That apart, there is one other critical issue. Movements and people and countries are sometimes caught up in what we refer to as an ethos. As an ethos. And I have had occasion in the past to see that in Guyana, the ethos which is overtaken us, in some regards could be described as corruption. In the broad sense, corrupt mind, corrupt morality, corrupt ideas. And so one may well ask the question, if there is some aspect of the current ethos which is identifiable with Muhammad, as much as it's identifiable in wider Ghanaian society, and therefore a basis for them to feel comfortable working with Muhammad.
Vincent Alexander, sorry, I thought you were finished, Vincent.
I'm finished.
You are finished. Vincent Alexander raising an important point. The ethos. In political science, we talk about the political culture. Has the political culture undergone changes or shifts that we have not been paying as much attention to? Because people respond in rational ways, even if some of us may think that their response is irrational. And people are social beings. And so socialization occurs within the context of what's happening around them. And so that question Vincent raises is a very important question. As I said, some of these questions cannot be solved in an election campaign. And one still has to conclude that our young people who may be following Muhammad genuinely are moved by something else other than ideas and manifesto and policies and so forth. And all of us have to take responsibility if we think that it's a negative thing. And so therefore, these young people are victims. They are not to be condemned. They are not, I insist that they are not to be condemned. They are responding to what's happening around them and how they see the world that they are living in. But it's an election year and we have to count votes. This is the time to count votes. This is not a time to go, trying to beat people up and give them consciousness and so on. That should have been done a long time ago. But we've had to recognize we have to count votes. That's how you win elections, is the number of votes. Vincent, any thoughts before we move on? Other thoughts before we move off the subject?
Well, in fact, I would kind of interrelate this subject with whatever else we're going to discuss. Yeah. And I want to say that this evening, I want to wear two of the many caps. And those two caps would be, obviously, the cap of an election commissioner, which is a very non-partisan and objective cap, and the cap of a Padre G, which may not be non-partisan, but certainly not partisan in politics. Not partisan politics.
Right.
And so, in whatever we do tonight, I will be speaking from the perspective of those two caps.
All right, let's get the first cap out of the way, and that is GCOM. Lots of action around GCOM, nomination day. A lot of issues have come up as a result of what happened on nomination day. Bring us up to speed with the issues that have arisen since nomination. We saw the big headlines, everything went smoothly, etc., etc. But then we hear some parties have to rectify some things and so on. Tell us where things are.
Well, as GCOM continues to execute its plan, the true nature of GCOM continues to unfold. And when we talk about GCOM executing its plan, I made it elusive that GCOM has a schedule of activities for the conduct of elections on the 1st of September. But the conduct of elections on the 1st of September is not tantamount to the conduct of free, fair, and transparent elections, because there are a number of things in our circumstance which have been called for, which are required for the conduct of free, fair, and transparent elections. And those things are not a part of GCOM's plan. They're not a part of the platform upon which GCOM has built its plan. And therefore, in that context, there can be no guarantee of free, fair, and transparent elections. But we will say, what does Alexander mean by that? Very simple. We have had proven problems with impersonation, identification of voters, substitute voting, fraudulent, all of which is largely pegged to the identification of our voters. Our ID cards go way back to 2008 and can hardly be used. The bulk of them can hardly be used for proper identification. And therefore, although we have names which would be said to be legitimate names, and people may turn up to vote in those names, with all the mechanisms we have, there is still a possibility that because of the dated ID cards we use, people can end up casting votes for persons other than themselves using those ID cards. Not to forget that you can also vote by an affidavit. So that the system there has a flaw which has been identified, which has not been plugged. And therefore, though people, the system will allow for people to come and they create the voters list and for them to vote, it is flawed. And it cannot guarantee the information. Because we have the evidence of 2020, if not before, of multiple instances where the names which are crossed off as having been voted for represent persons who the relevant authority, the chief immigration officer, has indicated were not in the country at the time. And there are many, local and others, who are burying their heads above that fact and trying to say that we have a foolproof system when the evidence, it's not a matter of logic now, when the evidence is there that questions whether in fact the system has not been manipulated. And of interest is the fact that there are those who have corralled the information that can be used to verify the system has been corrupted, or the opposite, and they have hidden those documents from any form of scrutiny, and therefore they have not given us the opportunity to verify the contention one way or the other. And in the absence of that, the information that's out there is information which says that there are lots of people whose votes were cast who are not in the country. So I am sticking with this question, not of merely conducting an election, but of conducting a free and fair election. And as I said, as GCOM continues to implement its schedule of activities, even then, the nature of things are becoming more obvious. And let me therefore deal with an example that's related to nomination day. We know that on nomination day, or even before nomination day, that the APNU had camped out at Imanian from the Monday after their launch. Nobody has questioned that. We also know that the People's Progressive Party turned up after APNU. We know that too. But we also know from the information they have put out, one Ms. Rodriguez has put out, that when they turned up and they did not see GCOM officials, that they went away. They did not stay. We also know that the AFC turned up and this the ALP, I think it is, turned up and this team. And I'm told that the FCM also turned up and this team. Yet when GCOM had to make a determination as to who was there first, who was there second, who was there third, they decided that the PPP's visit made them second. And the PPP itself said that they did not stay. Worse yet, GCOM's security officer, who in the public domain has a legitimate job, turned up and took a record of those who were present, being APNU, AFC, and ALP. That is GCOM's record. And yet when it came to making a decision, that record was ignored. And in fact, in GCOM it was argued that he was unauthorized to have gone and to have taken down those names. Now that he was unauthorized and had gone and taken down those names speaks to the manner of the management of GCOM and the way in which the chief security officer is not recognized for what he is supposed to be doing, and in fact is militarized. This is not the first time he's been militarized. I remember clearly at the last local government elections, when some of us went to the airport to witness the receipt of the ballots. When I got to the airport, the chief security officer was locked out in the tarmac. As a commissioner, he appealed to me to be allowed onto the tarmac. The people at the airport said to me they had instructions, and the instructions did not include him being on the tarmac. Now, going to the airport is about the security of the ballots. And here is the chief security officer not being one of the persons authorized to be on the tarmac to witness the receipt of those ballots. So I'm showing you a scenario of the way in which that officer is treated. But the other scenario of softer treatment is the way in which GCOM is not transparent in the conduct of its business. Transparency with the demand that all of the persons to be given a number are treated in like manner. That's what transparency means.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a principle of good governance. All of the persons should be treated in like manner. The People's Progressive Party is not treated in like manner. Though they themselves presented the evidence true that they were not staying the course as other parties had done. So we see inconsistencies in terms of GCOM's operations. And unfortunately, those inconsistencies seem to represent an interest. They're not just mere inconsistencies, but the inconsistencies which seem to represent an interest. In the instance I've given, it's the interest of the People's Progressive Party, because being in that line has implications for the processing of your list. If you're last in the line and somebody signed the two candidate forms, then the party that's first in the line gets the candidate, and the one that's last in the line has to go and replace the candidate. Similarly to nominators. So this is not child's play. It has an impact on how parties are treated when they come to actual nomination. So we see that. We saw what happened in terms of the very nomination forms, that after parties had started to use the official form, GCOM changed the form. And some parties, I'm told, had to go way back into the internet to redo work already done, at not insignificant cost. So that on one hand, we have clear examples of things which have been done or have not been done. That points to an election being flawed in talk about the whole process, being flawed. Yet we are proceeding with a contention from GCOM and others that GCOM will produce a proper election. I'm not using the word free, fair, and transparent. We're saying GCOM is prepared to conduct elections. The elections have to be contextualized in the terms of freeness, fairness, and transparency. And I could prove that GCOM has not gone full distance. We still have outstanding the issue of the incarcerated. Of course, all of the persons, barring one, have agreed that the incarcerated persons have the right, the constitutional right. One person is still trying to use convoluted arguments about if people are deprived their rights by virtue of imprisonment, and that deprivation extends to them not having the right, which is Bangladesh. We have legal precedents across the globe where that is not retained, and we have the majority in the commission saying yes, they have the right. Notwithstanding the one who said that they don't have the right seeks to publicly say that the others are also saying that. That's not what the record shows. So we have that problem still in some regards. It's becoming a moot issue because with the passing of time, these matters cannot be resolved in time for the elections. And so though it's an issue that we have not, in a sense, finalized, there is still this issue of asking the chief of opinion. It is a matter that with the passing of time will become moot, but not moot in so far that it speaks to the issue negatively of the conduct of a free and fair election. Because a free and fair election includes the idea of one man, one vote. And the extent to which people in Turkey are not being facilitated, it flies in the face of one man, one vote. We have facilities like proxies to allow people who are sick and in hospital have the vote cast. Similarly, proxies to allow people who are working with essential services, the transport and harbour, for example, to have their vote cast. We have a facility of ballot day. You have the discipline services who cannot be present at the place of poll on election day to have their vote cast on ballot. We have the workers of GCOM and the workers of GCOM who will be working away from their place of registration, have certificates of employment to have their votes cast. So there are lots of mechanisms recognizing when people can't physically go to the place where they register. There are a lot of mechanisms you can, and the law has put in place to facilitate their vote. But there's a clear case of discrimination. It's the people who are incarcerated. I emphasize those who are remanded because nothing has been done. And there's a resistance to anything being done to allow them to cast their vote. A lot of curious arguments about the need for this and the need for that. If you don't have this, you don't have that, then they can't. That's the context in which we are going to these elections, the context in which we will have observers who are probably going to be up and down. And I'm looking to see the extent to which they will take into consideration these issues when they make their pronouncements. In the past, they've pronounced and said everything was hunky-dory. Having said that, they've also said that there are things that need to be done to affect the system. Those things have not been done. And here are things that are not hunky-dory. And so it will be interesting to see how they will approach these elections, given what's behind us in some regards and what's before us in other regards.
Vincent, thanks a lot for that update. We know that perhaps for the first time, at least one observer mission is here long before the election, relatively long, in the sense that observer missions usually come in the week before election and then leave a couple of days after. We know at least one observer mission, the Carter Center, is here right now. And I'm sure that you all have been drawing to their attention these difficulties. They themselves should have historical memory of it because lots of these problems they observed at the last election and suggested that these issues should be fixed. What is it? What feedback you're getting from them as we move into another election? And these issues, like I said, some of which they pointed out, and they said that these issues need to be fixed so that you can have credible election. What is it? Can you tell our audience what is it they're saying 5 years later? They're here long before elections. The question of the list, the question of biometrics, question of incarcerated people voting, question of workers on election day being given a difficult time to vote. What are they saying?
I would go a bit further than 5 years later. Because when we conducted elections in 2015, which is 10 years, I interacted with the Carter Center at that time. And one of the problems we are now confronting was raised even then. This was a question of the large number of overseas Guyanese who were on the voters list. And even then, we were trying to confront this problem. And in discussions with the Carter Center, I raised the possibility, because of time not being our side, to have the names of the overseas Guyanese highlighted on the list. And the Carter Center on that occasion, 10 years ago, agreed with me that it was a cause they would even seek to champion. 10 years ago. And so here they are again in the Carter Center, with that issue still unresolved, with them having committed to championing an approach to this matter in the face of the possibilities. And mark you, in 2015, when I raised that issue, we didn't have the same level of evidence that we now have about the overseas Guyanese being voted for. There we were into a certain level of conjecture, logical conjecture, and were seeking to be preemptive. We failed. In 2020 it occurred, and the problem in 2025 has not been resolved. I think that I haven't had any in-depth discussions with the Carter Center. since they have arrived. In fact, I'm scheduled to meet with them tomorrow, and will redirect them to their own disposition 10 years ago. But you have to bear in mind that when you talk about observer missions, that's exactly what they do. They observe. And after observing, they write a report. And what essentially they do in terms of that report is to focus on election day per se,
Mm-hmm.
and to pronounce that things went well on election day. People were out to vote, there was good counting, the counting reflected how people voted, and so there was a limitation as to what you can expect of observers. That they have come earlier gives them a chance to have a look in. But I don't think it necessarily changes the protocols in terms of the report and how they will deal with that. But that notwithstanding, we have to continue to bring to their attention the issues, because the extent to which they eventually make recommendations is the extent to which they validate the issues which may have been raised, although they may have also validated the elections.
Vincent
Bear in mind, we're going to have somewhere in the vicinity of 2,000, about 500 polling stations. And observers cannot monitor 2,500 polling stations in a country where we've had elections over an extended period. The party winning by one seat represents approximately 6,000 that can be generated in 2,500 polling stations.
Vincent Alexander here, bringing us up to date with what's happening at GCOM. And of course, that last issue there is very important. For the first time in a long time, we see an observer mission is here weeks before the election. Whether that would make a difference, as Vincent says, he's not hopeful that it would make a difference, because observer missions generally observe on what happens on the election day. Our experience in Guyana has shown, especially as a result of the recount in 2020, it is now clear to those who don't want to bury their heads in the sand, to quote Vincent Alexander, it is clear that a lot of the rigging, a lot of the problems happen long before election day. We have the perennial problem of the voters list. We have a large voters list. We don't know whether it's larger than the population because we don't have the census yet. But given what we know and given some of the leaks from the Bureau of Statistics, it looks as though we have a list that might be larger than the population. Does this not interest the observers? Does it not say something to them? These are questions that we have to ask. Vincent, is there anything else you want to say about what's happening at GCOM, because before we move on to your other hat?
I just want to follow up on what we just discussed. Of interest is what the American ambassador has. The American ambassador said that she's confident that if the things which are in place are adhered to, that we have what it takes to produce an acceptable election. She said that. And I don't think that she has necessarily take into consideration that the things we talk about, even if they are all done, is not covering or does not alleviate us of some of the systemic flaws which can be exploited. You know, somebody asked me, I think it's an observer, someone of these foreign countries, what about the pink? Because that's another measure which they say gives the assurance. And I would challenge any one of them, prior to the elections, to let us sample GCOM's ink and let us see what are the possibilities of that ink being removed. And I can guarantee that that ink can be removed. I can guarantee that. And I challenge anybody to let's bring forward that thing and do the test. And we'll see where the system has gaps. Of course, the ink plus is a complete system, right? But the system is as strong as its weakest link. So though you have a complete system, if there's a weak link, that complete system becomes as strong or as weak as the weakest link. So I just thought I would emphasize that because there are certain news agencies in this country, and I have been exposed to certain diplomats, and I'm not necessarily referring here to the Americans, who have held on to this mantra that we have all the processes to ensure the elections are free. And holding on to that mantra, we have buried their heads in the sand to factual evidence that it has not necessarily worked and needs to be fixed.
Factual evidence that certainly calls us. So, as I usually say here, we are walking on two legs. We are counting the votes because we are in a contest, but we are also at the same time fighting against the odds. I saw the chairman of the commission saying that there's no partisanship, and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But thank you, Vincent, for the update. I'd like to welcome all of you onto the program tonight. Say a special good evening to the market crew. The market crew who are the members of that crew who were at the launch. They were at the nomination day, and they were very prominent. All ladies, well, no, there was one male among them, faithful loyalists. And they are organizing at the market there. Big market, Stabrook Market. Say special hello to all of you. Special hello to those of you in West Bobbies, especially the people in Maikoni, which is West Bobbies, Region 5. But, you know, geography is geography. Special good evening to all of you at Maikoni. Mahaika. Good evening to all of you in those little villages in Mahaika, little villages in Maikoni. Really looking forward to coming to that part of the country as the campaign gets going. Good evening to my friends and family in Washington, D.C., Maryland. I notice a couple of you are on. Good evening to you, Mr. Cadogan, and others who are on tonight. Not forgetting my friends who I haven't shouted out to in Canada. Good evening to you. And to all of you, please do remember the WPA Campaign Fund is on Some of you have sent in your contributions. Those of you who have not yet sent in your contributions, please do so. The details of how you can get your contributions to us are there at the bottom of the screen. Please do contribute to our election campaign, because we have to contribute to the APNU campaign. So please, some of you I know have sent money, sent your contribution via MMG. I think it's MMG. I think that's what it's called. I can't get the names when you send it to MMG, but we have gotten your contributions. For those of you in Canada, I promise to get the information to you. The next program tomorrow night, I'm going to get the information to you in Canada, how to contribute, and to you also in the United Kingdom, England, Great Britain, whichever one you all want to use. Thank you very much for your contribution, those of you who have contributed, and thank you in advance for those of you who have not yet contributed. Good evening to Buxtonians. You all see me regularly, so I don't always have to say hello and good evening. Good evening to the people in Beirut. I understand you all are doing it there in Beirut. Hope to come there shortly. Vincent, you said the other act you're wearing tonight is Ipadaji. And of course, this is the election season. How does election interest Ipadaji?
Very, very interesting question. When I said I was wearing two caps, I also said that there may be some interrelatedness between elections and Ipadaji. Ipadaji represents a constituency, a significant constituency, that of the people of African descent. Politically, they are not homogeneous, so they might be PPP, they might be APNU, they might be any one of the parties, AFC, etc. But that notwithstanding, they have some things that affect them as a people, even as they have a preference in terms of their political allegiance. And so what has occurred to me as these elections as the election campaign unfolds, is that I've heard no party in what they had to say address this question of the international decade of the people of African descent and what it calls for. Now, let me remind the people out there that we've had a renewal of the decade, and so we now have another decade from 2025 onward to 2034, I think, will be the current decade we're in. And the declaration for the international decade specifies things that ought to be done to redress the issues confronting the people of African descent. And much of what is specified requires state action. And therefore, it requires whoever is in government to take initiatives. And so for me, what has been disheartening is I have not heard political parties specifically speak to the decade in terms of their liking. Maybe those who may want to speak to it negatively, maybe those who may want to speak to it positively. But what we have seen largely is a neutral approach. So people are promising things for Guyanese at large, and there isn't any evidence of equity featuring in their consideration. Because if there was evidence of equity featuring, certainly that would be applicable to the manner in which they deal with the people of African descent, in as much as the manner in which they deal with other people. There are instances out there where implicitly the ethnic question is broached. So the PVP talks about what they do for sugar, given the people who work in the industry. In a sense, they're broaching the ethnic question. If they talk about rice, again, because of the large number of people involved in rice, they're broaching the ethnic question. So it may be contended that there is a party that's broached the ethnic question. But equally, it may be contended that there is no party that has sufficiently broached the ethnic question in relation to the people of African descent. And that's of concern at this time, at election time. Because now is the time you're promising you to do. The question is, what are you going to do for me? Not to the detriment of anyone else, but in the context of a decade which specifies that there is need for special attention.
Very, very important subject that is raised there, and it's one, as you all in this program know, that I've grappled with for years. Sometimes I'm critical of our political leaders, sometimes mildly so, sometimes more than mildly so. But it is a problem in our political process. As Vincent says, for the PPP, they can speak about the ethnic question without mentioning ethnicity and race. And they're usually very forthright about it, given where people in the support base, the ethnic support base, is located in the political economy. For the other parties whose base is in the African Guyanese community, it becomes a difficult question because as soon as we open our mouth to say anything about African Guyanese, we are called racist by the PPP. And then it forces our leaders to become defensive. And so, therefore, questions that have to do with African Guyanese do not get ventilated in an open way on the platform. Vincent, are you appreciative of that difficulty? And are there ways of getting around that difficulty?
I'm appreciative of that difficulty. That notwithstanding, I feel that you have to be driven by conscience, you have to be driven by commitment, and you have to have, as a result of your conscience and commitment, a disposition to these matters. Sometimes that disposition may not bring you the kind of political gains that you're looking for, and we have the historical evidence of that, because when Mr. Hoyt sought to deal with the economy in a particular way that politically might not have been prudent for him, he did it. And we saw what the result was. So I also look at this matter in the context of what political system we're advocating for. And I must confess that the only party so far that has unequivocally on the election trail raised the matter of inclusivity / shared governance is the party of Amanzo Bizini. It's the only party. And so, may I venture to say that in the same manner in which I am concerned about the way in which the ethnic issue has not been raised, I'm also concerned about the way in which the future political system, even as we continue to engage in constitutional reform, does not hold itself as a major item on our agenda. And so for me, that should be a major item. And I think it's important as we pursue this line of action that we make it elusive that every group deserves to be looked at and to be dealt with in an equitable manner. So that even as I express my concern for the people of African descent not being addressed directly, I'm concerned that we do not openly and candidly speak to the ethnic issue in a manner that gives every group the comfort of knowing that the future entails an understanding of their problems and an attempt to address their problems, and therefore providing comfort in your political choice based on what has been laid out, rather than have to rely on the traditional ethnic security. One can now rely on a national ethos that will not undermine ethnic security, but will enhance the existence of each and every Ghanaian and address the question of equilibrium across the ethnic groups. Now, if I can jump the gun rather than have you ask the next question.
Right. Yes, go right ahead.
In that context, the Parigi in April of this year sought to meet with the Ethnic Relations Commission. We sought to meet with them because we wanted to protest the delegation they had put together to go to the fourth session of the Permanent Forum, the People of African Descent. That, in some regards, is water under the bridge because they did what they wanted to do. But it's only in some regards water under the bridge because what they did still reflects a thinking which is and can continue to be in operation. So in that regard, that can still be problematic. But more important, in that meeting, we raised a specific issue. We said, look, this decade speaks to the need to address these issues confronting people of African descent. Issues which are manifesting institutional and legal arrangements and which can be discerned evidentially. And so we are asking you, the ERC, to look at your mandate and based on your mandate, to embrace the idea of a ethnic disparity assessment survey, which you should initiate the conduct of, the outcome of which will evidentially and factually tell you if indeed the people of African descent or any group is disadvantaged in any way, and therefore provide the basis for policy formulation to address that. We looked at the constitutional mandate of the Ethnic Relations Commission, and we saw where it said, Function 17, identify and analyze factors inhibiting the attainment of harmonious relations between ethnic groups, particularly barriers to the participation of any ethnic group in social, economic, commercial, financial, cultural, and political endeavors, and recommend to the National Assembly and other relevant public or private sector bodies how these factors should be overcome. And we're saying that this mandate fits plumb into what we are asking them to do, bearing in mind that Mandate 17 says study and make recommendations to the National Assembly on any issue relating to the ethnic affairs, including conducting studies to determine whether race relations are improving. And finally, Mandate 21 or Function 21, consult with other bodies and persons to determine and specify the perceived needs of the various ethnic groups for the fostering of harmonious relations. So we have an institutional and legal framework that can address this question from one view, determining the veracity of the issue. So you be prepared to say at this stage, don't take our word for it. Do the job to determine whether indeed there is the issue to be addressed. And so we, on the 10th, presented a petition calling for an ethnic disparity assessment survey. The Ethnic Relations Commission responded to us and asked us for some clarity in the matter. We gave clarity and asked them to allow us to submit a concept document to deal with this matter. And I'm pleased to report to the public that we have since submitted that concept document. It was submitted, if I'm not mistaken, in this month of July. It was submitted. And I think it's the 16th of July, the document was submitted. The document is entitled, Ethnic Disparity Audit and Rectification Initiative. So Apology has now put up a very concrete proposal for the ERC in the context of its mandate to conduct an ethnic disparity audit and rectification initiative. So we advise the public on this, and we're also looking to those political actors who would wish to have the votes, the people of African descent, give their support to this. And those who think this is a problem, to tell the nation it's a problem, so the nation could vote with them if they agree it's a problem. And so we have made clear where we stand on this issue, and we think that it cannot be swept under the carpet at this critical moment, the moment of elections. It is not the moment of elections that has triggered what we do. We will do this anyhow, but we think it's also an opportune moment for this to find itself high on the nation's agenda.
Vincent Alexander here tonight reporting on the IPADG and its linkage to the process as it unfolds in this election season, making the point that not any one of the parties has sought to address the issues as they directly relate to African Guyanese and in relation to the International Decade of the People of African Descent. Vincent, before we go, have you thought of, or let me put it another way, have you sought to meet with the political parties individually to discuss these issues?
I know for a fact that we will be dispatching to them what we have sent to the ERC, asking them to pay attention to that. And we haven't specifically asked to meet with them at this point in time, but we are making available to them our concept document with a cover letter, which will say to them, here's a matter which we are laying on the table and we're looking for your support.
Thank you very much, Vincent. As we close out, is there any closing thoughts before we go?
Yeah, there's a closing thought. I have one closing thought. There is, not in relation to this survey, but generally there's a pushback by some when we attempt to look at the issues confronting the people of African descent. There's a pushback and they're saying, well, it's a non-issue. It's a non-issue. So, for example, one of the more vociferous persons these days, Mr. Bond, takes every opportunity to tell this nation that everything is hunky-dory or everything is moving in the direction of being hunky-dory for the people of African descent, among others. And he uses an example to justify his contention. And the example which he uses is to say that there is some group of people called the empowerment, the group of African empowerment, something like that. And that this group of people have been the beneficiaries of 60 acres of prime land. And therefore, that's a clear indication that once Africans step up, they will benefit like anyone else, and that there really no problems. And if at all there were problems, that this is an indication that the problem is being addressed. And I say to Mr. Bond that his argument is so faulty, it's unbelievable. Why do I say that? We are trying to establish a system in which institutions and the legal framework allows every Guyanese equal opportunity. We are saying in that context, people of African descent, historical reasons and the retention of historical remnants of institutions and laws do not necessarily have equal opportunities. And they should have it as individuals. And the fact that the people of African descent have to come together in a group, like the group he refers to go and to bargain to get land, suggests that the system, in the context of human rights and constitutional rights, is not working. They've had to go and bargain as a group for something they should have access to as individuals. And so you can't use this group achievement as an indication that there are no problems, because the fact that the group has to exist is an indicator of a problem that has to be resolved. And so let us understand, that we are talking about the normal operation of our institution, the normal operation of our laws, and to allow every Guyanese to be able to access things in their right as Guyanese. And that we're saying that given what has happened historically, that the areas in which people of African descent have been left behind, and therefore, even as you equalize the opportunities, because they've been left behind, there's need for equitable action so that they can really equally access those opportunities that are said to be equal opportunities. Because things are never equal among unequals. What equity does is to seek to make you equal so that then you can really access what is referred to as equal opportunities. The nation needs to understand that from slavery coming down, there are pictorial examples of institutions that have not been beneficial to the people of African descent. as there may be institutions that might be beneficial to other ethnic groups.
Mm-hmm.
And that if we're going to be involved in nation building, we need to address those institutional and legal deficiencies. And anybody who argues that they don't exist, anybody who argues that there's no need for remedy, becomes a part of the problem.
And we'll have to leave it there. Vincent, thank you very much for coming on tonight and helping us out here on the program, giving us your report on what's happening at GCOM. And we have to continue to keep an eye on what's happening there. I know tomorrow is a very important meeting, so you will have next week a lot to report. And of course, it Padaji's take on what's happening here at around election time and the plea for issues as they pertain to African Guyanese to find a way on the political platforms of the parties. I can give you my assurance and my word here tonight that the WPA, when it hits the road in a couple of days in its complementary and supplementary campaign to the APNU larger campaign, that certainly those issues will be dealt with on our platform. Again, Vincent, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And to you, the audience, thank you very much for staying with us another evening. I am almost certain that we will have a show tomorrow night. I don't see anything to conflict with it. So we're likely to have a show. Please make your contribution to the WPS campaign fund, and God willing, we will be back tomorrow night. Remember, do not waste your vote. Remember, do not split your vote. Remember, talk to the young ones and let them understand that their vote is important. After your family, your vote. Your vote. Think. I'm preaching to the choir, but I want the choir to go out and preach to those who matter. Every vote counts. Every vote counts. See you all tomorrow night.